Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion in the first installment of our AI success series, how multi-location businesses can stand out from local competition. I am your host, Justin Meredith, and I'm really excited to dig into today's topic because we are going to talk about the different challenges of managing multiple locations, how to balance everything and properly manage the online reputation of each of those locations. And then we're also going to talk about how to set yourself apart from the competition online, and especially on Google. And to help us break all of this down, we have a very special guest who I will introduce to you in just a moment. But first, let me walk you through your webinar dashboard. So now in the middle of your screen, you should see the slides, and we'll be going through some slides that'll have some good information. So please keep those up. To the right side of your screen, you should see a window with some helpful additional resources. I think we've got a couple of guides in there, a blog post as well, with some really awesome, insightful information that should just help you continue your learning after this webinar. Below that, you should see, or below the slides, you should see our Q&A box and our comment section. In the Q&A section, please feel free to ask any questions. No questions are too small. We're going to try to answer as many as we can. We might try to get to some throughout the presentation, and then we'll have a short Q&A session at the end. In the comment section, feel free to say hello. We would love to hear from you. Let me know where you're tuning in from. It's always awesome to see just the kind of the spread of all of the people in the audience who are able to tune into these webinars. It's one of my favorite parts about being able to do these virtually. Now, also as a heads up, you can resize these windows. You can move them around to your liking and make, format your dashboard to the way that you like the best. I encourage you all to check out the box on the left of our speaker bio and connect with myself and with our guest speaker on LinkedIn and say hi. We'd love to hear from you. Also, before I forget, you will receive a link to the recording of the webinar once we're done. I believe you will receive an email around this time tomorrow. I think it takes about 24 hours for it to process and then the email to get sent out. So if you're not able to stay for the whole time, don't worry. You will get a link to the recording so you can go back and watch it. And now, lastly, on the top left side of your dashboard, you should see myself and our wonderful guest speaker who I would like to introduce to you now. So please join me in welcoming the CMO of Crowell and Associates Marketing, Ryan Crowell. Welcome, Ryan. How are you doing today? Thank you so much for joining us.
I am great. Thank you for having me. So I think I'm wearing the same shirt in that picture that I am in today. So.
Hey, it works. Now, before we dive into today's topic, we've got a ton to get through. But first, if you could you tell us a little bit about your background and your experience with multi-location businesses?
Yeah, so I have worked with multi-location businesses now for a little over 5 years. Started out working in the it started out in Corpus Christi, Texas. I had actually kind of fell into this a little bit. I've always been in marketing and have a degree in advertising. So I'm kind of one of those rarities that I have a degree in advertising and not marketing necessarily, but similar fields, but slightly different, I guess. But I answered a job post on someone was looking for a marketing coordinator, and and that was sort of my first foray into working for a multi-unit, company. And so when I took that job, I was in charge of 2 locations at that point. At that point, they had 8 locations. They eventually grew to over 14 locations. And I was eventually promoted, to being the director of marketing there. And a lot of that, was based on my ability to be able to sort of figure out how to get us on the map. I mean, literally how to get us on the map. Our former CEO would, or she's still there, but the CEO of that company, she would fly into Corpus Christi, and she would immediately Google what the location was, and it would never pop up, for her. And she jokingly said, I say jokingly because when I finally figured this out, I never got the car that she promised, but she promised a car to the first person who could make them show up, in the Google 3-pack. She didn't know it was called the Google 3-pack at that point, but that is in essence what we did. And so the next time she came into town, I had managed to get her into the Google 3-pack, and from there, that was sort of the history of it, and sort of getting, that figured out. I then moved on. That was in working for a freestanding emergency room group out of Dallas. I then moved on to the Houston market, to where I was the director of marketing, originally over 8 locations of of AFC Urgent Care. We then quickly built a marketing co-op, and that marketing co-op I spun off into my current company a little while back here. It's now 24 locations. We manage 24 different locations, the majority here in Texas, but we do have 4 locations that are in 3 other states. So 24 locations over 4 states, working in the urgent care market. So what I like to call fast med. But a lot of what we do is relational towards other, towards other types of businesses, not necessarily directly focused, on healthcare. I've worked in real estate. I've worked in weddings and funerals, and a little bit of everything when it comes to marketing. So,
wow. And so 24 locations across, is it 4 different states?
Yes. Yeah. Coast to coast. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, the first thing is, I think your prior executive understood the value of showing up on Google. If there was a point where they thought they would be buying a car for the person, you can get them ranked. I think that's just shows that there's a lot of people who see that, and there is a ton of value of showing up on that first page of Google, especially in that local 3-pack. But it's not easy. And it doesn't get easier if you have a lot of locations. In fact, it could be a lot harder because there's just a lot more to manage. So in your experience, managing all these different types of locations and dealing with the different personalities, and, with them being in different states, whether it's Texas or Minnesota or California or North Carolina, or really anywhere, there's different customer expectations, and there's different expectations from owners and things like that. So first, I'd like to dig into a little bit of the challenges that maybe you have faced, and maybe some of the people in the audience here have been facing. And if you are in the audience, please feel free to drop in the attendee chat, maybe some of the challenges that you're facing when it comes to managing multiple locations. I see we've got some people commenting where they're tuning in from. We've got people from Salt Lake. We got someone from Houston. We've got Calgary. We've got New York, New Jersey. Awesome. Well, that's amazing. And so let me get back to you, Ryan. And so going back, can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you've faced?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've worked in both both kind of structures, to where I worked for a wholly owned sort of corporation. The first company that I worked for, they owned all 14 locations. They were the brand. We were completely in control of the brand. We could literally do whatever we needed, with the brand. That's one set of challenges. I mean, there's some pros and cons of that. The AFC model is more of a decentralized model, to where you have a corporate structure, but then you have individual owners. That's my current world that I live in. One of the challenges to that environment is that I have 11 different owners that I work with over 24 locations, and so each one of them thinks slightly differently. They have a different measure of success. They have a different expectation, and so you have to sort of manage that. And then beyond that, like you said, we're in California, North Carolina, Minnesota, and Texas. And so you couldn't be any more diverse as far as climates and different cultures and expectations, as far as that goes. I mean, here in the state of Texas, it's, as many people know, it's been super hot, which really affects people and how their purchase patterns. Do they want to leave the house? Is this something that I want to do today? I mean, the very nature of what we're doing in urgent care is people are not dying necessarily. That's more on the emergency side. This is stuff that they wouldn't die if they didn't walk out the door today. And so, it's not unlike a lot of things. When I worked, in management at Target, if it rained, we knew that was going to be a day that we didn't do so well in sales. And so there's a lot of those things that sort of affect that. So our northern clinics, in Minnesota, where it's starting to get colder, those are things that are going to drive more, patients, versus here where, it's still, 80 degrees outside, and it's not, we don't have the same drivers. So, managing all of these different locations, all of these different expectations. When I was working with my social media, person today, I was sort of reminding her that, make sure that whatever we're producing, in North Carolina and California and Minnesota, has its local flair. Make sure that we are keeping an eye on what's going on in those different places. I think one of the things that I've really tried hard to be different at than a lot of companies that do similar type services to here is that I really try to make sure that, one, I go out and I visit those places. I go out and I know, the locations that we're at, that I don't just sit at this desk. I don't just do that. So a lot of this is understanding, where those places are. What are the challenges? What are what I call metaphorical walls? What are those things that keep people, from wanting to go here because they don't want to drive under the highway? Right. And try to understand your local market, understand those things. So there's a lot of effort that goes into managing multiple locations and multiple entities, in that. Now, there's some tools that we use. I have a toolbox that has 5 or 6 major tools that I use, Birdeye being one of those, to help me keep that organized. Because there is different messaging. Now, there's a lot of this that being in the same industry is scalable. But it is also, there are individual pieces that that have to be different per location, and you have to kind of manage that and keep on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that is a common challenge that a lot of people are dealing with. Just trying to maintain everything and understanding the expectations between what corporate wants versus what each local location needs, and especially with the difference between having multiple owners or franchise owners for each different location or a handful of locations at a time versus having everything centrally owned. Both of those scenarios can add all kinds of different twists when it comes to the process. Now, one of the things that I'd like to touch on, especially as it relates to your online presence and standing out on Google, and one of the things that we've seen that a lot of people do and have seen success with is that they try to optimize their Google business profile, and they try to generate more reviews. They try to make sure that all the information is accurate. And they try to make sure that that digital storefront is as best as it possibly can be. But one of the challenges that a lot of people have is, I just can't generate reviews. I don't know how to get more people to leave reviews in my business so that we can boost that rating. And can you tell us a little bit about the reviews game and what it takes to play that, and what it takes to win, or at least to play that game with a winning strategy?
Sure. I mean, I know when we talked about this before, we talked about the reviews game. I call it a game because it is a bit of a game, in the sense that if you play it right, you generally will succeed. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that most people make when it comes to reviews is they want to try to, for lack of a better term, they want to try to game the system. They want to pick and choose, who they want that review to go out to, who they want to make sure that they sort of curate their reviews. And the system isn't set up that way. The system is really set up for volume, and the way that it works best, in my opinion, and I've seen it both sides, is this. And I want to put a caveat out here, as we talked about this. If you have a good product, you have a good service, and it's something that you're doing well, then this works. If you don't have a good product, or you're out making people mad, or you are sort of legalistic in your approach to customer service, it's probably not a strategy for you. But for most people that have a great product and a great service, this works. Is that here's the thing: you're going to get some negative reviews. So be okay with that. Not okay with the fact that they're negative reviews, but be okay with the fact that you're going to get some negative reviews. Learn from those reviews, correct those problems, and use those as a way to motivate your company and your staff. Now, the thing is about negative reviews, if somebody is upset with your service, or they're a competitor, or they're a whatever, and they're intent on giving you a 1-star review, they're going to find you. They're going to do it. So by curating your reviews, really all you do is cut out the people that are on the other end of the spectrum, the 5 stars, that would have given you a good review, but they just weren't asked. What we find is that that people given the opportunity to give you a review more than likely will give you a review, and they will give you a positive review. They're going to give you that 4 and 5 star. I don't worry so much about 1 stars until they become a pattern, right? So if I have a location where I see a pattern, then I start to look at it. And one of the things that the Birdeye can do is with their sentiment is you can see some of these patterns forming. You can see some of the things that are happening underneath it all to kind of see it. If you're seeing common things, those are things you need to worry about. The one-off 1-star review, I'm not worried about it if it comes in, because I'm going to get enough 5 stars that are going to fully overtake all of those 1 stars. So for example, the group that I work with, 24 locations, 17,000 reviews. We're sitting at a 4.7, overall, and that doesn't, and look, we get a fair amount of 1-star reviews, over the course of it, but we're still able to maintain the 4.7 because we get so many 5-star reviews, because most people are happy, with what we get. So it's probably 25 to 1, 25 5 stars, maybe even more. I don't know that exact ratio, but I mean, it's significantly more 5 stars than 1 stars. And so those outweigh those. And so what we do is we want those 1 stars, we want to reply to those 1 stars. We want to reply to the 5 stars. But keep in mind, when I'm replying to those people, I'm not replying to the person who wrote the review specifically. I'm really writing to all of the people that are going to read that review later on. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people, when they're responding to a review, immediately try to take the conversation offline and say, hey, give us a call at this number so we can discuss your review. I don't say they never will call you, because I've had one time where they did. But overwhelmingly, they're not going to call you. They've said their piece. They've said why they're upset. And that's it. That conversation is over. You're not probably going to reel that person back in. You might, but likely you won't. And so what I try to do is, if it's a negative review, if I can find that person, then I will call them and I will talk to them and say, hey, what is it that we did? Can you explain your situation to me? And I'm not going to be defensive, about it. We may have earned that negative review. And I'd say probably half to 3/4 of the time we did earn that negative review. Now, sometimes it's a lack of understanding, or a lack, people aren't being reasonable, in that sense. And so you do see some of that. But a lot of times people have a legitimate, complaint. Like, for example, we run ads that say we're open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then occasionally we will have somebody decide at one of our clinics that they want to close at 7:45. And inevitably someone will show up at 7:50 and we're closed. I'd be mad too. And I tell people that. I'm like, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. I mean, own the mistake, and fix the mistake. Don't make excuses. Don't, if you made the mistake, fix it. And so that was something that, because I remember the person said to me, she goes, well, you're just going to tell me whatever I want to hear, what the company has. No, I won't. If we made a mistake, I'm going to admit it and we're going to fix it. Because if we told you we'll be open till 8, we need to be open till 8. So it's what I call in marketing, making sure that your external matches your internal. So the external promise we made is we're open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But the internal promise we broke because we closed at 7:45 or whatever time we closed, right? Those two have to mix. Those two have to mesh, And so to me, that's a big part of the review game. Ask every single person for a review. Respond to every single review. Respond to them so that later on, if you get a 1-star, you are the reasonable one in the conversation. Because when I go out and I look for reviews, I look at 1 stars. I don't look at 5 stars. I look at 1 stars. And I want to see specifically, how did they respond to that person? And if they seem like the reasonable person, then I'm more than likely going to give them the benefit of the doubt, over the person. Because I read enough of these reviews where I'm just like, wow. I mean, just, okay, let's bring it back in a little bit. So yeah. Anyway, so that was a long answer to your question. Sorry.
No, it was perfect. And you brought up a great point about you're responding to the review, not just for that customer that you're responding to, but for everybody reading it. Something that I've heard companies say is, well, we don't want to respond to that review because we don't want to shine more light on it. We don't want to give it extra attention and give it more air. But in reality, it's really doing the exact opposite. Whenever someone leaves a negative review of a business and the business just ignores it, everybody else who's reading that review is seeing that. And they're only going to see that one side of the story. They're not going to understand the context. They're not going to understand what else went on in that situation. They're not even going to know if that person is an actual customer or not. They're just going to see that negative review, and that's going to be that perception. And so whenever you respond to that review and you do it with professionalism, that that air of calmness, and that, hey, then being genuine. Really, it's all about being genuine and showing that you're authentically wanting to address that issue and solve that person's problem. And a lot of times that person will see that response, because a lot of times when someone leaves a negative review, they're venting, they're emotionally charged. That's why people
Yeah.
people who have bad experiences are more likely to leave a review, because they're so emotionally charged. Whereas on the other side of it, where there's just not, like, you really have to blow someone's socks off for them to leave an unprompted 5-star glowing review. Like, you really have to, like, knock it out of the park. And the proportion of that between the people who have a bad day and the people who have their socks blown off just isn't balanced. And so the only way to balance that is to ask all of your customers for a review, because more often than not, like, if you're a good business, that you provide a great service and you have, and you care about the customer experience, more often than not, you do have a ton of happy customers, way more than you have unhappy customers. You just have to give them the opportunity to leave you a review and for them to share that feedback. And that leads me to another talking point that I wanted to get to, that we didn't quite touch on with the challenges, but I think something that happens a lot when it comes to multi-location businesses, or even just normal single location businesses, but it's having to compete with larger competitors, or maybe other competitors who could be taking that online real estate. If someone were to search for, urgent care near me, or emergency care near me, or anything like that. And one of the things that we've seen work a lot is, like, when you have those reviews and you have that social proof, that really does help you stand out, especially when it comes to those big chains that may be harder to work with, but you know the name. I know, especially in your industry, you said it perfectly the other day when we were talking. You said, we provide a need, not a want. And I thought that was a very interesting way to put it, because people aren't, like, when they're healthy and things are going great, they're not thinking about the urgent care that they would go to in case of emergency. What happens is the emergency happens, and then they search for the nearest, or like the best possible urgent care that's near them. So when it comes to that side of the thing and trying to stand out over competitors, what are some of your strategies on how to do that?
Well, I mean, I'll say this. I've discussed how I believe in what I call a ubiquity strategy, right? A ubiquity strategy this is my own term. I believe in making sure that we educate people, as to what we do. One of my mentors, talks about, giving away your best stuff for free, in the sense that can be that education piece, that you can educate your users in, or your potential patients or potential clients in the different pieces. So that way, later on, when they, all of these things go into building that top of mind awareness. So that later on, when they're looking for that service, you become that top of mind, right? And so, to me, it's getting the logo out there as much as, humanly possible, getting the message out there as many times, as I possibly can. A lot of people, they want to put so much of their budget into the bottom of the funnel, into that PPC advertising, into that direct, get the client now, mentality. And they've sort of missed the top of the funnel. They say that, it starts at the top and it trickles down. The sale you made today didn't happen today. It started way back down the line, and that's at that top of the funnel. And so, it's that, you're sort of whining and dining, your person here. Think about this like in a sort of a dating relationship. You start out at the top of the funnel and you work your way down. You get to know them, you get to, experience, the different things that they offer, and all of those things. You wouldn't make that decision right then and there, but then a lot of people expect people to make that decision right now, and they're not familiar with them. And so if you look at it from that sort of a metaphor, that you need to get to know the people that you're, that you're buying from or that you're selling to. That's where that top of the funnel comes from. So using that branding, getting the idea. So like you said, well, they may be familiar with that, with that brand already, and so that's why they choose them. That's because they did all of that work to get to that point, right? I mean, all of this work, is there. So you can't just walk in, and expect that that's going to be there today. So we work through the funnel, so a lot of branding, a lot of, getting video out there, getting, people to understand, what we do, what we provide, because you're an expert in your field. That's what you do. So if you sell houses, things that would be second nature to you, people don't even register necessarily over here. Or if they think they understand it, they don't understand it, right? I mean, I asked my realtor so many questions, about things that I felt silly asking because I thought I should know, but that's why I'm paying him to be there, right? And so same thing here. You have the opportunity to educate. No matter what you do, you have the opportunity to educate your potential customers. And then if you educate them, the chances that they then believe you as an expert, which is what and one of those pieces of the algorithm is, what is your your expertise, what is your they want to see that what you're selling, and that you're an expert in the field. All of this stuff kind of comes together in that. And so I did want to get back to one thing. I see a couple of these questions on here. The incorporating the HIPAA compliance into the reviews, because that one really stuck out to me. The other one, Lucy and Jay, I do have answers for you on those. But Jules, I wanted to point out that you were asking about the HIPAA compliance, and this is true of any industry. I talk in generalities when I talk about things. This is how things should have gone. So if we did something, in our in our visit with the patient or the customer that went south or didn't follow the protocol, what I try to do is I talk about how things should go. So I don't necessarily talk directly about their issue. So now, if someone came in, for example, and said they were disappointed because they didn't get antibiotics, well, they've already brought it out there. They've already talked about what it is. So I'm not talking about them specifically. I'm not looking at their chart. I'm not, responding to it in that sense. I'm just talking about why we may or may not give antibiotics, right? And so again, it comes into that education piece, that piece where you kind of talk about, this is how things should go. This is what your expectation should be. And so that's kind of how I handle that. But I mean, it's a great question, because it's kind of a hot topic, in the healthcare world, of how do we respond to people without, violating HIPAA? So I don't acknowledge their visit necessarily. You just sort of toe that line, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah. And it's a great point. What you were talking about earlier when it comes to your term, your ubiquity marketing, and making sure that you are starting that sales process well before they're even truly aware of who your business is. And when you think about it, like if you just think about yourself for a moment, and you think about all the time you spend on your phone, and all the time you spend driving, and you're passing billboards, and you're watching TV, and you're seeing commercials, and you're scrolling on your phone, and every fifth thing you see is an ad. People are being absolutely bombarded with advertisements and brands and businesses more than ever in human history. I really do think that. I don't think there's ever been a time in our history where we've been hit with advertising more. And so you really have to find ways to kind of plant those seeds amongst that sea of ad and those promotions that people are seeing. And whenever that happens, whenever they need you, you'll stick out in their brain. Whenever they get hurt, or the kid breaks an arm or something like that, they'll remember all of those little things that they saw from you and your ads. And that's just on that side of it. But what happens is they're like, oh yeah, I did hear about them. And then they'll Google you, or they'll search, and then they'll see that you have 100, 200, 300 amazing reviews. And that review piece right there is what solidifies it. That's what gives them the social proof, like, okay, I've seen these guys everywhere, and clearly they're doing something right, because all of these people are giving them all these praises online. And that's really when you set the hook when it comes to landing those sales and those extra customers, and you're bringing those people in. And what that does on that, and that's just on like the buyer mindset side. But what it also does is that it gives Google a lot of trust in your business, because Google's whole goal is, I need to know that you are who you say you are, you do what you say you do, and you're located where you say you're located. Because when I have a user that's trying to find a local business that's near them, I need to know that I can trust your business to be the best possible result. And when it does that, it does a few things. It scans the entire internet to verify your information is accurate. So that's making sure your website has accurate addresses, business names, contact information, but not just your websites, making sure your Google business profile is accurate and it matches what it says on your website, as well as any other listing website there could be. So that's like Bing, Angie's List, Facebook, for example, like all these different websites where your information could be listed. That is being taken into consideration when Google's trying to figure out how much it should trust you. And the more that Google trusts you, the more you will show up in that first local pack up there in the search results, because it's like a circle of trust. The user is trusting Google to present them with the best possible results, and Google is trusting the businesses that they have their accurate information to put them at the top of the results. And so whenever you're approaching your online reputation, thinking about it in that perspective really does help you understand where you should be prioritizing your efforts. Because it's like, okay, will this help Google trust me more? Because when Google trusts me more, I rank up higher and I get an explosion of clicks and web traffic. And those reviews are such a solid factor when it comes to that. No matter how many different search algorithm changes or anything like that, it always seems like the reviews are like the anchoring factor, because those are real humans that are real verified customers that are leaving their real feedback. And that is just an absolutely powerful component of it. But there is a difficulty in managing all of that. And that's one of the things that I love about Birdeye, is that when it comes to multiple locations, like if you have 25 or 24 locations or 50 or 1,000 locations, and you want to make sure that every customer is getting a review, you can send out those automated requests to every single customer. And that goes back to playing the reviews game, which is really a numbers game. And it's the more people that you ask for a review, the more reviews you're going to get. And the more reviews you get, the higher you're going to rank on Google. And not only that, but the more protected you'll be against those negative reviews. So let's move on. I wanted to kind of recap that. I mean, we do have some really great questions. And hopefully I answered that a little bit for you, Jay. I think we're going to dig into that, your question a little bit more here in a second. But I'd like to talk more about your approach, Ryan. When we talked before, you've mentioned that you like to take I think it's a 40-20-40 ratio when it comes to the funnel, and how you like to 40% at the top, 20% in the middle, and then the 40% at the bottom. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, as I kind of spoke earlier when I said that everybody wants to jump to to PPC. That's I'd say if that's a challenge sometimes I have with some owners, is that they want to spend the bulk of their budget in PPC, and I will, okay, let's rein that in just a little bit, because you're really missing the branding component of it. I know you and I talked about, I said I went to Kansas State University and we had a pizza place there called Pizza Shuttle, and I can still tell you 25 years later, I haven't been there in 25 years, that their phone number is 776-5577. Call us now, Pizza Shuttle. And my wife, who went to the University of Kansas, she could tell me the phone number for the Pizza Shuttle there, and it's a different phone number, but they just beat it into your brain so many times, that you remember that. Right. And so, this idea of sort of getting, in front of people so that people remember you and know you, that's a big part of it, is in maintaining, that top of mind, awareness, in that. So.
Yeah. And I think one of the nice things when it comes to that organic foundation is that whenever you stop paying for PPC, you still have that strong foundation of an online reputation that can withstand, or that can still grow and continue to grow. Kind of like what you were telling me yesterday, that it's like working out. It's like exercising. When you work on it every day, if you eat right and you work out every day, you're going to feel better. That's just kind of the way it goes. If you're consistent about it. I'm not that consistent about working out. It's harder for me. But if you're able to, you're going to see those results and you're going to get stronger. But if you stop and you take a long break, you're going to start seeing that stuff fall away. And so it's one of those things that it's a never ending thing. You have to be consistent about it all the time. Now, one aspect that I've seen a lot of businesses either thrive at or they struggle with, and that's just monitoring and collecting and understanding the data that they're receiving, whether that's through customer feedback, whether that's through web traffic and ad results or social media engagement, whatever it may be. The more locations you have, the more data you have coming in, and the harder it gets to sift through it all and organize it and really truly understand and interpret what you're looking at. So from your experience, how have you managed data, and how have you used it to maybe help provide, better insights and help improve the business?
Well, I mean, I'll say this. I mean, I think, as I've said, you're one of two people. You're either a data person or you don't want to deal with the data and you want somebody else to deal with it. And I'm very much I love the data. To me, data doesn't lie. It really gives you a roadmap, to where things are going. I recently wrote an article on my LinkedIn profile where I talked about how most service providers that do PPC management overspend on their budgets. I just took over a gentleman who was spending $15,000 a month on PPC, and we've got him down to 2,500, and really based on the data, because the other company wasn't using their data. They just basically were using sort of anecdotal evidence based on a radius. They're running I think a 5 or 6 mile radius. And what we knew was, looking at our customer data, is that most of our patients come from within 2 to 3 miles. And so anything beyond that, we figured out that 70 to 80% of our patients were coming from within 2 to 3 miles. We need to fish where the fish are, right? I mean, we needed to really rein that in. And so the thing is if you're not looking at the data, you're not understanding that. You're not understanding that your data sits right there on your desktop, where your customers or your patients, or in my case, patients, but your customers are coming from. Who are they? I've talked to owners in the past. I remember speaking with a real estate agent at one point, and he said, "I know exactly who my customers are." And I said, "Well, your data says something different." So you have to trust the data. And so I use a variety of different tools. I use, Birdeye is obviously a big tool, that I use, but I also have several other tools that I use. I also have a custom created dashboard that I have built that has, so much slicing and dicing of it that it's a little hard sometimes, for other people, to get in and manipulate it, but that's fine. It's for me. So I can get in and I can look at it. So you have to find a tool that works for you, or in my case, a suite of tools, because you have to find one that does everything. They all have sort of what they're really good at. And then, from there, we use that to, really kind of direct our decisions, based on that. So yes, there's some gut in that, but the data leads that. The data goes in and it tells us, who those people are. So yeah, we could really overspend, in vanity if we wanted to go out 5 or 6 miles. Boy, that makes the numbers look really great. I could come back and say, boy, we had all these conversions, we had all of these clicks, but really, let's be honest, the only conversion that matters is the patient that walks in the door for us, or the person that, walks in the door to meet your agent, to buy a house. I mean, it doesn't matter. You really don't need to spend a huge amount to reach the audience that is most realistically going to buy your product. And that's the part that a lot of people overspend on. And so, in fact, I know with my first company, we were actually we got to a point where we needed a little help with an outside agency. And so we were going to hire this outside agency to come in. And the night before we had our presentation with them, they called me and they said, "Well, we don't have enough budget." What do you mean you don't have enough budget? I don't understand. They said, "Well, we need to go out 5 miles, and to be able to get these people in." And I said, and it was a seminal moment for me. And I was like, you don't understand our business model. You don't understand our patients. People aren't going to drive that far in most cases to come to one of our centers. You're wasting money to go out there. So we were not as valuable of a customer to them, and they were not as valuable of an agency to us, because fundamentally they didn't understand our product. So,
yeah, and being able to accurately understand what your data is telling you and how you're supposed to use it. I think a good example of something that I've seen that helps a lot of people is the sentiment analysis from Birdeye. It's one of those things that no matter how many locations you have, you can be bringing in thousands of reviews from hundreds of locations, and not just reviews, but surveys, direct emails, social media comments, anything it may be. And it can aggregate all of those reviews and sift through it, analyze it, and it will come up with the true sentiment analysis of like what people are actually saying about your business. And gives you so much ammo when it comes to understanding how do our customers feel about us? What experiences are they actually having? It's much more than just the 2-star rating or the 3-star rating or whatever it may be, but it's these are the pain points. These are the people who, of the negative reviews. This is the specific reason why they're leaving that negative review, and it can span across all of your locations. You can pinpoint it to certain ones. I just saw we had a question talking about will Birdeye segment based on location, and yes, that we do. And it's one of those things where you can pinpoint trends that are happening in a specific state, region, city, or specific location, or just across the whole board. And it's in real time, and you don't have to go and you don't have to pull it manually. Everything is aggregated into the dashboard, which is really, really cool. And that's just one aspect of it. There's also a competitive analysis where you can actually not just see what customers are saying about you, but you can also see what your competitors' customers are saying about them. And just having that understanding of like, okay, well, where are my competitors winning and where are they losing? And you can use that as information for yourself and say, okay, well, if my competitors stink at this, then I'm going to make sure that I'm awesome at that. And it can really help arm you to be, provide solutions that maybe you didn't even know that you needed to have. And it identifies issues that you didn't even know you had. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, where you like to have your boots on the ground. You like to go to these different locations. You like to truly try to understand what the patient experience is, or the customer experience. And so I think one of the things that, this kind of helps transition to the next thing I want to talk about, because this is the AI success series. And I would like to get your thoughts, Ryan, on automation, AI. We're in this new era. It's been almost a year since ChatGPT came out, and it's been kind of just transformed the way businesses are looking forward for the next 2 or 3 years. Where, Birdeye, for here, we've totally embraced it. And I know that there's people that have all kinds of different feelings and thoughts about it. And the one thing that I think can just go without being said is that it's here to stay, and it's going to continue to advance and evolve. I mean, I think last week ChatGPT just came out with, hey, not only can we just do text, we can also now talk to you with a real voice, and we can see what you're saying, see what you're talking about with images. And that's only, been less than a year. I think it was November when it came out last year. So it's moving really fast. So what are your thoughts on kind of the progression of AI and how businesses might be using it or will use it, and how customer or patient expectations, kind of where will that relationship be when it comes to AI in terms of like automating things and stuff?
So I thought about this, and then we talked about this a little bit yesterday, as we were preparing for this webinar. And, I thought about it a little bit more. And I think that to put a lot of people's minds at ease that are maybe uneasy about AI and how do you implement it, or are you going to get left behind? Or are you we're not using it. Take a less DIY approach to it, and seek out vendors that are already leveraging it. Right. And so in this case, Birdeye. In our case, we use Solve, to manage our bookings and manage our patient flow. So we have partnered with different vendors who are utilizing it. They have the bandwidth to invest, in the people and in the technology, to get that, in there. So you don't necessarily have to leverage AI directly, in a DIY sense. You don't have to paint your own walls. You can, and there's certainly some fun things that you can do. I would encourage, you to go out and get an OpenAI account, play around with ChatGPT. There are some valuable pieces in there. There's some things that we've used it for, but it's not the core of what we do. We seek out vendors, that have these things built into their tools, and so I do think that automation, can play a huge role, in the future of things, but it also, I want to be cautious about, we can't automate too much. I brought this up yesterday that I'm locked out of my Facebook account, and I have been for a week. And then I got back into it for 30 minutes and then got locked back out yet again, and it's all based on this automated process of getting back in and out. And it's a frustrating thing, for your consumer. So you got to be careful, in how you do it, in the sense that there are automation tools that are available to you You can automate your messaging, you can automate, your reviews, you can automate all of this stuff. But so, for example, Birdeye has an AI tool to where you can answer reviews. We don't use that straight out of the box. We go in, we let it write the majority of it, and then we go back in and we maybe change it. Now, we also take a different approach that the more you write, sort of the more we respond. So I mean, if you mention that you were in from out of town in your review, we try to mention that, hey, we're glad you were visiting Houston. I'm glad you had a great trip, except you had to go to the urgent care. We kind of try to have a little bit of fun with it, too, and put some, some human, touch into it. But there's a lot of things that have to be answered. So there's a lot of things that automation can do to help you. I mean, Facebook has their chat bot that works quite well if it's implemented properly. But like in our case, I was telling you, I said, our corporate structure, they one time turned on the chat bot and didn't tell us. And all of a sudden we just got flooded with messages. And we had no idea why we were all of a sudden being flooded with messages. And it took us about a week to figure out that they had turned this on and not told us. And so we had to go back in and say, okay, let's turn it off so we can so we can adjust some of these answers to make sure that it works. Because yes, there's a lot of similarity between locations, but there's also things that are different, that need to be answered differently. So we had to go in and sort of adjust this, but it does save time, because it saves time for people to be able to go in and have, what time are you open? So what are your hours? Where are you located? Do you take this insurance? Do you do that? There's a lot of these things that can be automated that really help them, because they get an immediate answer, and it helps you because you don't have to take that time out, to do it. I was telling you, for example, unfortunately, the group that I work with, we have a closed, EMR, which is the health equivalent of a CRM. We have a closed API, so we can't use the open API that Birdeye has, to be able to automate the reviews. Even then, it only takes me 10 minutes to send out 24 locations worth of reviews. Before, they were doing these one at a time with each single person, through another service, that they could text out. And I mean, that took an incredible amount of time for that person to have to go in. The other thing we were able to do was automate using surveys. So we use surveys, we use a pulse survey, that helps us identify where those problem, patients are. So if you're an 8, 9, or 10, you're prioritized over here. If you give us a 7 or below, you're prioritized over here. And each one of those people that got a 7 or below are physically called. And so we're able to identify, because we get about twice as many survey responses as we do review responses. And so we're able to automate, in those ways. So I hope that, that explains that.
I think that's perfect. And kind of to echo what you were saying is, I think people really need to be careful about approaching AI as a crutch and not as a tool. When you can automate everything, that's great. But if you just let that be the end all be all, that's really kind of where you limit yourself when it comes to like how you can really truly provide an amazing customer experience. A great example is like what you were just saying with the review responses. Now, whenever you're responding to reviews and you're getting hundreds or thousands of reviews, you can use those automated responses to help process a lot of the easier ones, maybe just like the positive ones. And, we use a more advanced large language model now to where it's not quite as just those standard bot responses. So it doesn't look like it's the same response every time, but there's a lot that can be handled on the lighter stuff so that you can spend more time on maybe the things that require more focus. Or if you're using the review responses for every single one and you're going through them and you're watching and you're reading over and you're editing, that's the best way to do it. Because for me personally, I've always felt like I was a better reviewer and editor than I was just a writer from scratch. And so if I could have something that can write a 85% there review response and I just have to change a couple of things, that is going to save me a ton of time compared to having to write every response from scratch. And it's similar, it goes back to the automation side where it's just automating those review requests. And we said it before, the more reviews you request, the more the more reviews you'll receive. It's a tongue twister. And I've seen businesses that are like, hey, we can do it ourselves. We can make sure that we ask every single customer for a review. I was like, that is amazing. That's what you should be doing, and make sure you respond to them, but you should be doing that for sure. That's incredible. Congrats. And the problem that they have though is, yeah, we can do it for a week or a month or even a year, but it eventually it's just not consistent. You start growing, you get more reviews, or you get more customers that you have to talk to. You bring in a new person and maybe they're not quite as forthcoming when it comes to asking for reviews, and so they're not doing it. There's a lot of ways that manual process can be limited. But one of the best ways that you can combine those efforts between using that real human touch and that automation is by doing both. So if you like I think you were telling me yesterday that like the review responses you got whenever you would ask someone face to face or in person were so much stronger, and you had a much higher success rate than just sending a link. But if you were to combine that in-person request with a link, so it's like, hey, we would love for you to leave us a review. It would help us stand out online so more people can have a great experience. It would just we would really appreciate your feedback too. And you just leave it at that, and then maybe an hour, 2 hours, maybe later that day, they get a text or an email with the link, and it's just one click and they're leaving the review and they're done. And when you can combine that face-to-face interaction with the simplicity of the automation and making it really, really easy for them to leave you a review, that is when you're going to start seeing some amazing results. And that's really kind of when you start seeing that explosion in the number of reviews, your star rating, and then your ranking, because then Google notices the spike in activity. In a webinar that I was in a couple of months ago with an SEO expert, Steve Wiedemann, he was telling me that one of the things that he would have his people do whenever they're helping out with a local business, or he would tell his clients, is that when you're going to work in the morning, put it in Google Maps. Even if you already know exactly how you're supposed to get there, have all your employees put it in Google Maps and point it to your business, because Google sees that activity. They see that people are going there and are mapping to it. And so that's just one of those ways you can kind of help boost yourself up. And it's the same thing with your reviews, and it's the same thing with responding to reviews. Google notices when it sees that activity. One of the things that I have a lot of people ask, and I'll just answer it now before we get to that question, but the response to a review does not help your SEO, but the review itself, the keywords that are in that review do. And so when you're responding to reviews, don't think, okay, I'm going to help boost my SEO by cramming a bunch of keywords in the responses. It doesn't quite work like that. But if you can get your customers or your patients to leave detailed reviews with a lot of, detail, and they use certain keywords and they describe their experience, that is massive. Because I don't know if you guys can search it in Google right now for like best cheeseburgers near me. And when you look at those reviews, you'll see that some of those in the local map pack will have cheeseburgers in the review, and it'll be bolded. And it's just letting you know, like, hey, this person talked about cheeseburgers and they said it was the best in town. And so whenever you're approaching your reviews, I encourage you to look at it that. And when you're approaching AI, I encourage you to look at it as a tool and not a crutch, and try to combine the efforts of like your human nuance and that human touch and that authenticity along with the automation to help make things easier. And so we've got a couple of things I want to get to. We're running a tad behind, but I want to get your final thoughts, Ryan. So we've covered a lot today, but what can the audience walk away with? What advice do you have for them when they move forward in trying to manage their online reputation for all these different locations?
Well, I mean, when we talked about this yesterday, I said, I think you need to make an investment, right? You need to make an investment in time. You need to make an investment in money. It does, but it returns. It returns the investment, if you take the time and the money to put into this. We use Birdeye because it allows us to save time, over here, and we don't have to take extra time to do those things. It allows us to aggregate those things. But I think, the biggest thing is being genuine, in your, in your approach to it, that you're, just like, hopefully you don't work just for money. You get some other sort of, reward out of it. I think it's in being genuine, and it's in just doing the work. I mean, that's a big part of it. And I'll say this, I'm a digital marketer. I do believe that digital, fills the gap. But going back to what you said, a little bit ago, where we were talking about, at the end of the day, the best salesperson is that person that's in front of the customer. They're the ones that can ask for the reviews. They're the ones that can sell the product. We're here to sort of fill in the background and to be the reminder and to be that. But if you're genuine in the product that you sell, and you have a good product and you want to get it better, and it's in giving effort. I mean, as much as I'd love to tell you, that advertising and marketing and reputation and all this stuff is, there's some secret sauce. It really isn't. We talked about it yesterday. It's reach and frequency. How many times do you get the message out? How far do you get it out? And is it a good product? If you have those things, you'll do well. Put the effort in. Go to the gym every day. You'll feel better. You'll look better. Do the marketing every day. You'll feel, your product will feel better. It will look better. It'll get in front of more people. It's not a hard concept. It's really not. But a lot of people really overthink it. And to be quite honest with you, a lot of people, they quit too soon. I mean, I think the exercise example is a great metaphor. Mm-hmm. They quit too soon because they don't see the results today. They don't see it right now, and therefore it's never going to work. Well, if nothing else, you win on the, in the attrition battle, because eventually a lot of these competitors, they fall away, and they don't put the effort into it. They don't put the budget into it. And so, a lot of this is an effort driven, kind of thing. And so to me, that's the big piece about it. Answer reviews, sell your product, market your product, and then turn around and do it all over again. And that's the key to it.
Yeah. If only I had the same self-discipline to the gym as I did towards marketing, I would be jacked right now. Yeah. That metaphor is so spot on too, because it's one of those things where it's just like going to the gym. Like, the more you do it, the easier it gets. The easier it is to get up in the morning and go. The more that you do this stuff, the more that you focus on your online reputation and your marketing, the easier it gets, because you're going to figure things out. You'll start creating processes. You'll start gathering tools that make it easier for you to scale. And it's just one of those things. Honestly, like, I'm going to have to write like a blog about it being like the gym, because that was a great metaphor, Ryan, because it's so true, where the more consistency that you have, the more that you do it, the more results you'll see. But as soon as you stop, you can see that fall away. And that kind of takes me to the last thing I want to talk about before we jump into Q&A. We might go a couple of minutes long. So if you're tuning in and you can stay a couple minutes for questions, great. If not, we're not going to stay too long, but I just wanted to let you guys know. You'll also get a recording, or a link to the recording as well tomorrow. So if you can't stay, no worries. But when it comes to Birdeye, that is really kind of what I love about it, is that it makes being consistent easier. And we really try to enable you not to use it as a crutch, but as a tool. So a great example is with our reviews. I just talked about those with the automated responses, like being able to use them to kind of get that first chunk down, and then you can be the reviewer and editor versus the person who has to write it from scratch every time. And the same is with social media. I saw we had a question about social media as well. And I'll make sure to save your name, and I'll email you with a link to some of our other webinars where we break down like social media itself. Because that was a great question. But just a high overview is that, like, we've just released Bird AI, which is this, basically, we basically just like injected AI into everything that we do. And what happened with this social tool is that it evolved very quickly. And now we've enabled people to not only just manage their social media and schedule things out ahead of time, no matter how many different locations they have. So like if you have 50 locations, you can manage all 50 Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn accounts, whatever it may be, all from right there. It's really cool. But now you can create hyper local content for each location automatically. And we use kind of like that ChatGPT style large language model. So you can just tell it what kind of post you're looking for. And you can say, I would like a post that is going to be based out of South Houston, Texas. And we're going to talk about, 10 ways to keep your lawn looking great in the summertime. And it will pull the information about Houston and that kind of climate and everything, and it'll create this local post. And you can say, okay, well, now let's do that for 5 different locations in these different cities. And now you can create hyper local content at the drop of a button. And all you have to do is go through and touch it up, make sure the branding's good. You can adjust the style and the tone. You can do all that stuff right in the tool. And on top of that, you can also get images created automatically, like kind of similar to the Midjourney tool. So now, no matter how many locations you have and all the different platforms that they're on, you can create social posts and images and schedule them out for all those different local locations in the same place. And it's just one of those really powerful tools that enables you to do a lot more, but it doesn't mean that you can just put it on complete autopilot and let it run itself. You still have to have that human oversight to make sure that it is moving in the right direction. And I think that's how it should be. I don't think we should be having everything just run on autopilot, because we lose the human element of it. And that's kind of the opposite of what great marketers do, because great marketers, they develop relationships between the brand and the customer. And when you don't have that human element, it makes it a lot harder to build a relationship. Another thing that we do, and this is similar to another question that we had, but with the listings. And the listings is really cool because it scours the entire internet of all of the different places where your business could have listing, your business's information could be listed. And it enables you to update all of the information for all of those Google business profiles for all your different locations, or all the Better Business Bureau profiles, or Facebook, or Bing, or whatever it may be. It allows you to do all of that from one place, so you make sure all the information is accurate, so you don't have, your Facebook profile, your name isn't capitalized, whereas in Google it is, or your address has a digit wrong, or you moved and you acquired a new location and you have to change the branding of that. You're able to handle all of that in one dashboard. And it creates AI generated SEO optimized business descriptions. It enables web chat and messaging, so you can use the Google messaging where people can submit messages quickly from Google Maps or whatever. And, it's like, hey, what time do you guys open? Or, are you guys going to be open on Sundays, or whatever it may be? It can have those kind of simple answers automated. And then if the customer asks something that may be a little bit more nuanced or advanced, it can find the right person to direct that customer or prospect to. It's a really, really cool tool. And it's really aimed at strengthening the person behind the screen, not replacing the person behind the screen. Something that I've heard a few times now is AI is not going to take jobs. People who know how to use AI are going to take jobs. And I think that's just something that has resonated with me. And I think that's something that people here, listening in can tune in on, because, you can use this automation to completely transform the way that your business operates if you do it the right way. And that's one of the cool things that I just love about our approach here at Birdeye, is that we're trying to not just replace people. We're not trying to just automate everything so that it's just not human related at all, but we're allowing people to do so much more with less. Because a lot of times you have these local businesses, or maybe even just a single location, where like they just don't have time. Like I was telling you yesterday, Ryan, I used to work on a food truck, and we smoked barbecue all day. And I was working in marketing full time, and this job was just a side hustle. And I was trying to help out with the social media, and I was like, golly, like how in the world am I going to have time to create cool social media posts and videos and all kinds of stuff that I want to do for this business? But we're sitting here, we're slinging brisket, we got to get these deliveries out. We got to do all this other stuff. And so being able to have something that can help take care of more of the mundane, tedious tasks, and then I can just go back over, add my personal elements to it, and then send it out, it just saves you a ton of time. So
funny you say that, because my wife yesterday was looking at some reviews on a company that she might want to, do some freelance work for. And it says the social media, management, in itself was another job. And I just looked at her and I'm like, thank you for proving, what I do all day long, is not just sitting in front of a computer. So, it's right. I mean, it is. I mean, there's so many little things that you have to do to maintain this stuff. And so this helps, with that.
Yeah. So we definitely ran a little bit longer than I thought. We had a couple of questions that I wanted to get to. And if we did not get to your question, I will make sure that we have somebody email you with an answer, because I want to make sure that I want to make sure that everybody, walks out of this feeling like they got that value. But we did receive one that I thought was really interesting. And I wanted to see what your thoughts were. I think this was from earlier. Oh, here it is. And it's does Google know if a blog is written by AI? Does that hurt your ranking? From my experience, no, because Google cares about good content. If the blog is well written, it has credible sources, and it can verify that it's correct, then Google's okay with it, because what they care about is providing the best possible information for the person who searched for it. But whenever you're using AI to create content, you have to be very, very careful that it is accurate and that it is correct. And so it's not like it thinks, oh, this thing was written by AI, even if it's a beautifully written blog with a ton of verified sources and stats and things like that. But because it was written by AI, we're going to tank your rating. That's not how it works right now. It's still very new. We could see how things evolve over time, but right now that's kind of how things are. But another question that we have for you, Ryan, is do you have each location manage and monitor their Google accounts or maybe their Birdeye accounts, or is that managed by you and then you just try to pass things down to the right people? What is your process, and what have you seen as the strengths of that?
Well, yes and no. Depending on the group, that's involved. I have, groups that are one location. I have groups that are 10 locations, and the one that has 10 locations has a regional manager, and in a perfect world, they monitor it as well. I think the best practice would be that each individual location would have some involvement, some ownership in it. That doesn't always happen. But I can tell you the better locations are the ones that have, some involvement, in that. And so I do think there's a good approach. I mean, we just took someone that was a one-off client of Birdeye and brought them into our system here. And so they'll be part of it. So they'll get a kind of the best of both worlds, in the sense that they'll have me and my company sort of help them oversee it to make sure that nothing's missed. But, they very well are already, involved in the day-to-day operations. And that's really, I think, the best approach is that they are involved in the day-to-day operations. We help monitor it. And, and sometimes I'll point out, I know which groups are a little stronger than others, which locations maybe need a little bit more prodding than others. And so I'll keep an eye on it. And there are some locations where we answer all of their reviews. And then there's some locations where they've come back to us and they say, we want to answer all of our own. Okay, that's fine. That's one less location I have to deal with. But I'd say probably 3/4 of the locations we have some sort of, direct involvement with, in that. Now, we'll always monitor it, and just to make sure that something isn't missed or, I've gone back to owners and I've said, hey, I might have changed the tone of how I answered this particular review. I'm not trying to be negative. I just think that you're responding directly to that person. You're missing the opportunity to respond to the greater audience, and so, and just point out, but then always follow it up with a positive. Hey, y'all are doing great. And they are, I mean, I don't want anybody to feel like you're coming at them with negatives, in that sense, but just try to help them, because the thing I think as marketers, we need to do a better job of is make them to understand that's what you do, for a living, and you're experts at it. We're experts in how to talk to people, or we should be, and how to respond to people. I don't draw blood. I don't do IVs. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. I do this. I communicate, and that's my job. So
That's great. Well, we've definitely gone long, so I will let everybody go now. Thank you so much, Ryan, for taking the time to talk with me today and share your insights with the audience. I think we had a ton of great questions and a ton of great comments. And if you did ask a question, I will make sure to reach out to you with an answer. And if you want to learn more, I highly recommend checking out the related content and connecting with us on LinkedIn. And definitely give a follow to Birdeye on LinkedIn. We do some really great content that's focused on just educational content. We just like to write blogs and things like that help businesses get better at being online. Really is kind of like the best way to put it. We have live streams with experts. We do case studies and all kinds of great stuff. It's not just one of those accounts where they just talk about, it's not just a bunch of self-promotion. We've taken the approach to social, at least with thought leadership. And so if you're looking for a good follow when it comes to local marketing, Birdeye is a great account for that. And also just don't forget, you will receive a link to the recording about this time tomorrow. And if you don't get that, let me know. You can email me or you can email us at events@birdeye.com. Or if you'd like to learn more about Birdeye, you can check out the demo button that's on your dashboard or email us at that email, events@birdeye.com. But until next time, thank you guys again so much for joining us. And we will see you in the next installment of the AI Success Series. I think it'll be coming up next month in November. I want to say November 9th. But be on the lookout for that. But until then, we'll see y'all next time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.